Thank you, Aoife. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is the third in our series of webinars designed for member universities to learn from each other how best to navigate the transition to a world in which COVID-19 has disrupted every aspect of a university life. Every WUN member university has experienced a major dislocation and has had to adapt quickly to the new world. The underlying problems are similar everywhere, but because in different continents and countries, they're expressed in different legal and cultural contexts, different aspects of them become more or less prominent and have led to varied solutions. Moreover, because many of the steps have had to be taken quickly, mistakes have and will be made, and it's good to learn from these. The diversity of its membership is what can make WUN so valuable for exchange of information. And today our 5 panelists come from 5 universities on 5 continents. Each will speak for 5 minutes, focusing on a particular issue within the general topic of sustaining research in the face of often complex and severe constraints resulting from the pandemic. I'd first like to introduce Walter Dixon from the University of Alberta. Walter is Professor of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology in the Department of Agricultural, Food and Nutritional Science, and he's Interim Vice President for Research and Innovation, a role that puts him at the center of all aspects of managing research. His remarks today will provide an institutional perspective on restarting research and establishing a new research normal. Walter?
Thanks very much, Peter, and thank you to Aoife for helping set this up. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your geographical location. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I'd like to start by sort of setting a little bit of context, first from the COVID perspective, and then from our own university's perspective. So as of September 8th, 2020, Canada has been relatively fortunate in its incidence of COVID, with 134,000 cases and just over 9,000 fatalities. Alberta, one of the provinces of Canada, has recorded 15,000 cases and 248 fatalities, and that's the jurisdiction I'm in. So obviously, compared to other jurisdictions, we're in relatively good shape. Our 2 major centers, Edmonton and Calgary, populations of about 1 million in each city, we have respectively about 3.6 thousand cases in Edmonton and about twice as many in Calgary. As a whole, Canada's been relatively successful at flattening the curve through basically aggressive measures to slow the spread, and also widespread public education and really good public compliance with the Chief Medical Officer of Health's guidelines. From a university perspective, the U of A is, by Canadian standards, a large research-intensive university. We're spread over 5 campuses. We have about 40,000 students, of which about 20% are graduate students intensively involved in research. We have 18 faculties, so we really cover the research spectrum in a comprehensive way. We also have a medical school. We bring in about $500 million in sponsored research revenue per year, which places us in the top 5 universities in Canada. We have a very large physical plant and large research infrastructure, which obviously was a challenge during the ramp down and the subsequent ramp up. So just to give you a sense of the timeline, March 15th, 2020 was when the university declared a state of emergency in response to COVID, restricted gatherings of more than 250 people, and closed our schools at that time, and they've been closed now for essentially 6 months. We're just going back to school now, both at university and in the K-12 system. Our first initiative was to really shut down the teaching programs and move to remote delivery, which we did almost over a weekend, which was really spectacular that we were able to do that successfully. We reduced the university operations within several days, literally, and put a pause on almost all of our research, which we considered the category of non-essential research. The exceptions were research that was directly related to COVID-19 itself, also any research that involved animal care or maintenance of breeding colonies, or maintenance of plant collections had to be maintained, and research that was considered part of essential clinical activities was also maintained. Very quickly, we formed a public health response oversight team, and one of the working groups that was established was the research impact team, which I chaired. The research impact team looked at a wide variety of issues, which I'll talk to in just a moment, but essentially involved registering and monitoring all of research activity as it slowly ramped up from essentially the end of April onwards. We've had a gradual climb out of complete shutdown. It also included a look at field and community engaged research, which presented specific challenges. It also looked at funding continuity, both stipends for graduate students and also the grants to carry out the research itself. We also looked at space allocation, including campus traffic, and also the specific issues of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. We formed a relatively large team on the research impact team. This is information for participants who may be still engaged in planning for how they're going to ramp up their research. We had representation not only from my office, the VP Research and Innovation Office, but also our university veterinarians, representatives from the libraries, a selection of associate deans of research from the research intensive faculties. We had communications experts. We had representatives from facilities and operations to deal with infrastructure requirements and services. Our procurement and supply team. Research funding was looked at by someone in our office. Field and community engaged research was also a focus, as I mentioned before. Research computing was represented. Our Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research, to present a student perspective, was also represented. We had weekly meetings via Zoom of all of these individuals to really plan how we were going to respond and ramp up our research. We've now moved to every 2 weeks, so we don't need to meet once a week, but we also report up through the larger oversight committee, which deals with academic issues and all of the other issues you can imagine in response to COVID. So what I'd like to step through now is very quickly some of the issues that we dealt with on our research impact team from an institutional perspective. Firstly, we had to understand all of the public health requirements and the changes that were occurring on an almost daily basis as the pandemic has continued in response to the Chief Medical Officer of Health. All of our research groups had to register with our environmental health and safety group, laying out the number of personnel that were involved, the occupancy of their research space, the resource requirements they needed. All of those kind of things had to be registered in online forms that were captured by environmental health and safety. There was also unannounced visits to any lab that had registered to ensure that there was compliance with the physical distancing and the sanitation requirements to carry on the research. And there was always the potential for shutting down those non-compliant research groups. We had to make sure that all the research groups understood the challenges of the novel SARS-CoV coronavirus 2 and had the ability to do really effective hazard assessment and address public health orders in those shared and common spaces that many of our buildings had. We also looked at things such as janitorial and maintenance requirements, any signage that was needed, sanitation that needed to be done by our janitorial staff, any infrastructure improvements such as plexiglass shields, etc., personal protective equipment. We reviewed laboratory supplies such as cryogenic gases, helium, liquid nitrogen, etc., consumables and reagents to make sure that the supply chain was intact for our researchers. We tried to emphasize as much as possible that researchers should stay home and work from home if they possibly could, and only come onto campus when it was absolutely necessary. We had to, all researchers had to have continuity plans and had to have the ability to shut down their research within 48 hours if there was an outbreak of any kind detected on campus. We also monitor and record attendance on campus on a very regular basis to allow for contact tracing. We developed through our computing science department a check-in tool that allows that to be done on mobile devices. And I'll give you a link through IFE so you can check out our website and find a lot of this information I'm presenting. We also monitor traffic on campus through Wi-Fi signals, unique Wi-Fi signals from each user on campus, so we can see where the hotspots are in terms of traffic. And our check-in tool allows us to find out which building people are in, and so if there is an outbreak, we can figure out who else was in the building at the same time and be able to report that to our health services team. Some lessons learned in the last few minutes, what we've learned from this crisis and our response to it is, number one, communicate constantly, relentlessly. You have to keep the researchers informed as to what's going on. Really have a great deal of clarity and transparency in all your communications and messaging. Be empathetic. It's really important to understand the particular stresses that researchers and students in particular are under. It's a highly stressful time. And just one simple example, we've moved over to virtual remote thesis defenses now, and that presents challenges because thesis defenses, as you know, are challenging enough at the best of times, but in a remote scenario, it's particularly difficult. So that's just one example. Being empathetic to the different challenges that researchers face is very important. Recognize that individuals are affected differentially. So early career researchers, those researchers, often women who are the primary child caregivers, are taken off campus to do homeschooling, for example, and have less time available for their research programs. So respecting and recognizing those differential needs. Also, different disciplines are affected differentially. We have everything on our campus, as I'm sure many of you do, everything from wet lab research right through to fine arts and performance and sculpturing and the full spectrum. So each of them have different requirements for their research and different responses are required. So really good communication is essential. It's important to assess the risks and really err on the side of protecting the health of all individuals. Have well-developed contingency plans in the event of an outbreak is also essential from our perspective. So I'm looking forward to participating in the Q&A, but I'll leave it there for now and turn it back to Peter. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Walter. Our second panelist is Sarah Thompson from the University of York. Sarah is Professor of Physics and the Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Sciences. Through this role and other positions she's held on scientific boards, Sarah is particularly well placed to observe the problems faced by the sciences. And in her remarks, she'll consider challenges that the pandemic has posed for scientific research and share her insights and disciplinary expertise on restarting lab work. Sarah.
Hello, everybody, and greetings from Yorkshire. So I'm going to share my screen with you and get that going. And here we go. So yes, as it's just been said, I'm going to focus in my presentation really about restarting research and restarting experimental research, a subject very, very dear to my heart. I recognise a lot of what Walter has just described. The University of York is about half the size of Alberta, but I recognise many of the same things that he's just been talking about. And in particular, we set up quite quickly a number of different contingency groups, we call them, to deal with different aspects of the university activity. And in this case, a research contingency group. So we had a university oversight. But I think the main message that I want to discuss, if you like, and prompt discussion, is about where we found decisions needed to be taken, where responsibilities lay in getting research going again. And I think the key message is the importance of our technical staff. And so you'll notice that I've put on here, this is the presentation that we put together is joint with our faculty as the Sciences Faculty Technical Manager. So if you look across this slide and you look at the detail of these three donuts as they're called, but you'll notice the red, which is the shutdown research, which was where we were when the UK very quickly shut down. So as it's just been described, everything shut down fast, almost instantly. And we kept small amounts running in just the way Walter has described. And then as you get to the right-hand side, in the current situation, over the course of about a month, we've been able to really be fully functioning again. Key thing in terms of strategy, if you want to put it that way, is our realization we needed to keep as much decision-making local as possible. So what do I mean by that? We found in the end that the university was best placed to reopen the space, but really didn't have the expertise to know how to restart research activities or how to prioritize. And that as you go down in the hierarchy, if you like, the faculty could say which spaces needed to be open, but really it was the departments in discussion with researchers who decided exactly what and who gets priority, if you like. And that to try to do that from a top-down perspective becomes overwhelming and really is not going to function. So we were helped by a few things in the UK, and certainly from the York perspective, and that we had some guidance that was issued by the government on the 11th of May about working in laboratory environments. And in a way that gave us the ability to say and to make a decision at a high level in the university, we can now work on how we're going to open labs. And that gave our estates departments, if you like, the permission to concentrate on that. So we knew where to start. So going into perhaps just a little bit more detail, there's this wonderful statement: all departments and researchers believe their research activity is important, and they are, of course, correct. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that really you can micromanage. And so, what we found was our estates departments, a building is a building, and really, they need the guidance to know which buildings to open and in which clusters of buildings is going to be most effective to research. And that was the role of the faculty. Otherwise, it's just an enormous spreadsheet and no one knows where to start. The other aspect of allowing research to start, and what we did from within a department but overseen by the faculty, was how to manage the risk assessments, which Walter has referred to. And the way that we did it, I'm sure, is quite common in that we didn't want to interfere with risk assessments that already existed, but we created an overlay risk assessment which contained all the COVID-19 secure aspects. And those were done in departments where they could, they know, the particular layout of a biology lab as versus to a physics lab, as particular buildings. So they were done very locally, but overseen centrally to make sure that we were complying, obviously. Perhaps no time to talk about now, but happy to answer questions when we get to it, that we applied a similar logic to restarting field work. And I admit that there are still challenges here in terms of face-to-face field work, but we're trying to apply the same logic. So perhaps already mentioned, but it's the departments that know the details, that know which researchers are most desperately need to get back in the lab because the contract's coming to an end, or a PhD student is coming close to the end of their thesis. They understand the technical details in that particular laboratory. So this local, making these decisions in the local position was most important. And I really do want to emphasize the role of the technicians. Without their expertise, and in fact, it was our faculty technical manager who, with the group of technicians across the campus, made the prioritizations decisions. They, in terms of which spaces and how to open them and to work out what the risk assessment should look like. Without their knowledge, this would not have gone anything like as smoothly. And then we have in the UK something called the Technician Commitment, and they have written a report. This is a link that you'll be able to access later, not about the restarting research, but about the experiences of technicians during the pandemic. And I think you might want to see that at a later date. From the researcher We're going to hear from a researcher shortly, but really it is a great moment when they're back in the labs and you can see them working there. Now, and yes, so lessons learned. It's always better in retrospect. And I think the top line of this is, don't close in the first place if you can possibly help it. And the way we're looking at what we would do differently next time, and next time I don't mean in many years, I mean in the next few months, is to go into some kind of hibernation rather than closing our buildings, so that we can keep things ticking over, so that it is very easy to restart again when we're able to do so. And of course, now we all have our risk assessments and our COVID secure environments. It is very much easier to do that. Now, if you will allow me just one more, another perhaps half a minute, I wanted to end with a little bit of something a bit more lighthearted. And Walter's already said, communication is critical at all levels and frequent throughout this. But also because if you are communicating, it becomes a collaborative effort. It's important not to forget things like the tea and coffee room and make sure you've got the right layout in there. Our technicians designed door handle openers. And I'm going to end with a very short video, which the electronics workshop in the chemistry department built. And I will show it to you in action. I will just show you 10 seconds of it. And we will end at that point. 1 second. I think that's going to end in the right place. I think.
Sanitize your hands here. Dispensing. Thank you. Rub the gel over all the surfaces of your hands and fingers until your hands are dry. This should take around 20 seconds.
So I think there is an experiment here to see in which discipline such a machine lasts the longest before somebody smashes it. But I just put a shout out for the creativity of our technicians in difficult times. So thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. Excellent way to end. Our third speaker is Felix Asante from the University of Ghana. Felix is professor in the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, and he's also the Pro-Vice-Chancellor with responsibility for research, innovation and development. His remarks today will focus on strategic and institutional approaches to restarting research at the University of Ghana. Felix?
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter, and good afternoon. Let me share my screen. What I'll be doing will be more of sharing with you what we've gone through as a university in terms of adapting to the COVID-19 and some of the lessons that we've learned from this. University of Ghana currently has a student population of over 40,000, and we have 4 colleges. So College of Education, College of Basic and Applied Science, College of Health Sciences, and then College of Humanities. Certainly humanities forms about 60% of the student population and the faculty. We have 4 priority research areas, because malaria is a big concern. Our leading medical center, which is the Nguchi Memorial Research Center, has been focusing more on malaria research. The second is transdisciplinary research into climate change and adaptation. The third is enhancing food production and processing. And then the last is development policy, poverty monitoring and evaluation. What we've learned from the COVID is that our first priority area, which is on malaria, we've taken a decision to broaden that to also include some of the infectious diseases. We'll say this because the University of Ghana and by default, the Nguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research has been the leading center of the national COVID exercise. So virtually about 80% of COVID tests in Ghana was done at the University of Ghana, and it's through the Memorial Institute for Medical Research. So what we had to do was deploy almost all the labs to facilitate this national assignment. Okay. We also had some of our scientists sequencing the genome of SARS-CoV-2, which was an innovation for us, and that also brought to light the capacity of our research facilities, especially those in the clinical aspect of research. My office, which is a research office for research, innovation, and development, still continue to intensify its research efforts in seeking for funds for all the disciplines that we have on campus. And I must also say that the 4 priority areas that we research in, we encourage or we do more interdisciplinary. Okay, so we have scientists working with social scientists and all sorts of things. And that is the direction in which we are moving. So despite the challenges, we had a few COVID-related and non-COVID related grants. And as I'm sure most of you would notice, most of the donor funds are all moving in the area of COVID-19 related research. So at Legon or University of Ghana, research didn't come to a halt. What we did was for graduate programs, those who are doing more of humanities and using secondary data, they were allowed to do their work. What slowed down was working in the laboratories. Okay, that slowed down quite a lot. Data collection for human participants, we also started doing it online. So, and it even goes on now. We currently do most of our interviews and interactions using Zoom for those who have Zoom. And then for those who don't, and we have to be there physically, we've developed protocols such that when you are going out, you need to make sure that you are in a mask. You also have to get a mask for the one you are going to interview. You use hand sanitizer, and you also make sure that the one you interview also has hand sanitizer. So we had to quickly adopt this strategy so that some of the human subject research can go on. So our ethical review process also for human subject also changed. And for those who were doing field work, they had to report to our ethical unit almost every 2 weeks, updating us on what was happening. And also making sure that as much as possible, they have their personal protective equipment with them when they go out to do most of their field work. And we've also managed to have online workshops and discussions. So we moved from physical engagement to most of our presentations being online at the University of Ghana. Now, in terms of lessons, failures, and challenges that we realized that the universities and governments must make funds available for their national mandated priority research areas. And for us, the example I gave that our main medical research center is driving the national COVID-19 test. Now, every attention is gone into that. And if we are not careful, some of the priority research areas of the countries in terms of maybe other diseases might even be forgotten. So all of a sudden, issues of malaria, cholera, nobody talks about that. Everything is COVID. Every resource is focused on COVID-19. And we are saying that we need to find a way and make sure that even though COVID-19 now is important, we also don't forget about the other diseases. We also need to have flexibility in institutional research agenda. And here we are talking about modification that will suit the emerging global research needs. And for this, I think we keep on coming out with best practices in terms of what we do in research. And I must also say that For my office now, everything is electronic. So submission of reviews of contracts, submission of requests for funds, submissions for ethical review, everything is online. And for the ethical review committees, they also meet online to approve proposals. That fits into the need to adopt online virtual platforms for personal and group interviews. Even though we are going through this platform, we also appreciate the need for physical interactions. What we've noticed is that for the virtual platforms, at times you'll be in a group, but one will be doing something else. Okay, and once a while, we need to find a way of having physical meetings so that we can interrogate the issues. So even though virtual meetings are going on, we've seen a little limitations which we are trying to improve upon. And now that cases of COVID has gone down in Ghana, we will try to have a blend of virtual and physical meetings, having in mind all the COVID-19 protocols. There's a need to promote the use of secondary data, which currently we are encouraging most of our social scientists to do, so that there'll be less contact with human subjects. And then enforcing the use of PPEs during research sampling collection, especially for the humans. So in a gist, this is what University of Ghana, in terms of the broad research areas, is focusing on. We appreciate that clinical research has gone down, and it's something that now that the COVID cases is going down, we want to find a way of reactivating some of the laboratory works, both for students and then for faculty members. And on this note, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Felix. I'd like to remind participants in the meeting that we'll be taking questions after the panelists have finished making their introductory remarks. If you'd like to pose a question, please use the Q&A mechanism on Zoom to do that. We'll move to the questions as soon as the panelists have finished making their remarks. Our fourth panelist is Arturo Molina from Tecnológico de Monterrey. Arturo is Professor of Product Innovation and Vice President of Research and Technology Transfer. In this role, and in others he holds on national and international science boards, Arturo is particularly well placed to see what the pandemic has done and how we might to adapt to it. And he will be discussing the redirection of research and technology transfer during the pandemic. Arturo?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you for the invitation to share with you some of the experience that we have faces and challenge at Tec de Monterrey. And let's first may introduce Tec de Monterrey because we are a unique university in respect to how we are organized. So Monterrey Tech is a very large private non-profit university in Mexico. We have 26 campuses in 29 cities. So you can see the complexity of how we can face and the challenge of COVID and the lockdown that we have since March this year. So we have more than 10,000 professors, we have 92,000 students, we have different levels. We are not only a university, but we also have high schools and of course, postgraduate studies and bachelor's degree. And we are a comprehensive university. So we have all the disciplines, and we have been engaged in also on doing research in all these areas. And what is really important in this is that we were locked down on March 16, 2020. We were the first university in Mexico to do it. So we discussed this with the board of directors and the board of trustees about what we should do as Tec de Monterrey because of our complexity. And we make a decision on March 13 to close down, even though the government of Mexico didn't send that signal to the universities. But we made that decision because we knew that because of the complexity of Tec de Monterrey and how many students do we have and professors and how we could impact really a negative way if we can get the pandemic going on in our campus, we decided to close down Tec de Monterrey at that time. And also because we have research going on in different campuses, we decided also to really ensure first that our PhD that we were to graduate in May 2022 have access to the facilities, even though we were trying to consider all the health issues and safety issues that we were thinking to pursue on that regard. Also, because we have some financial projects by external funding and we have some deadlines, we also tried to see how we could accommodate the laboratories to ensure that that ongoing research could really be able to continue it. And of course, we have to comply with the wet labs and the life science research. We have 2 hospitals also at Tec de Monterrey in Monterrey. So we decided also to make one hospital non-COVID and one hospital COVID. So we could have really a safe place to continue research in the area of medicine and applied science. So the hospital and non-COVID hospitals, we just take the measures to really continue research there. And then we have the other hospital to attend COVID people that has the disease. Also, we were able to have access, grant access to faculty and students, but being sure that they can not really have all these problems of contagion. So we allocate some certain number of hours per week so the faculty could go there and also take consideration some on healthy issues, using masks, washing the hands, and also taking temperatures and so on. And well, what we also decided is that we have to refocus our research and trying to redirect to tackle different needs on the pandemic. And I'm going to show you more or less what we have done. And I agree with all the speakers so far. We have to keep clear and frequent communication with the research community, with the students and the families, so they know what they should do and they know what is going to happen. We were able to switch our educational programs in 1 week. So we went full offline. When we did the lockdown on the 16th, we were full online on the next week on the 23rd, because we have a lot of experience already from the earthquake. One of our campus during the earthquake was closed down, the Mexico City campus, and we have to continue education using an online program. So we have that experience of having more than 8,000 students already taking classes online. So we were able to do that, to continue the education 1 week before we decided to close down the campus. And we refocused all the research, and we were seeing that even though there is some research that was not related to COVID, anyway, we were trying to do things related to diagnosis, protection, sanitization, monitoring of building accessibility. Well, we have our School of Medicine, of course, they were doing clinical treats, and we were participating in some vaccines in Mexico. And also we were start thinking about recovery, because we believe that's also very, very important. And of course, we also put together some research team to think about the future. We call it the post-COVID era, and also to see how we are going to be able to do the economic reactivation of Mexico, what are the social impacts in Mexico, prevention and so on, and also taking care of the vulnerable groups care. We have been hit really hard in COVID in Mexico. You know, we have more than 64,000 deaths already, and we have more than 500,000 people being positive of the pandemics. So it's for us very important to really try to focus on changing all our research and focus on our research. We were able to build up in 3 months a ventilator, because we were thinking that was one of the things that we should be able to do, as we saw what was happening in Spain and Italy about the lack of ventilators. So we developed a ventilator together with other organizations in Mexico. So we are now producing that ventilator based on technology that we developed. And of course, once we are focused on that and we are continued doing research in the area of COVID, anyway, we have to really restart doing research in some other areas. So we have trying to prioritize health and safety. And we want to do it because we are going to open the campus as the government give us what we call it the green light to open the campus. We don't know if that's going to happen in late September or October, but we have organized the campus in order to really open what we call it a hybrid model of education and also of research. But we are really evaluating all this information about COVID, about what we should be doing, what are the information about the state officials, what are the regulations about the federal government and so on. And we are also have our expert systems on health and monitoring with our own models of the COVID pandemic. Of course, we're going to open slowly all the research activities that are non-COVID. And of course, we are expecting to do that, especially for students who has to graduate again now in December 2020, and for projects, ongoing projects that has to be finished by that time. Again, communications, frequent communication with the community students is continued a priority for TEC de Monterrey. What are the main challenge? One is that we have a system that is monitoring COVID also from TEC de Monterrey perspective, but because we have a multi-campus operation, we know that we could really have a different dynamics in different campus. So probably in Nuevo León and the state and the city of Monterrey, we have to open because it comes green before Mexico City, for example, and so on. So we have to manage that complexity on opening and closing campus because of the lights and the government regulations. And of course, we have to fulfill all the research projects and all the contracts that we already have established with different stakeholders at TEC de Monterrey. But also we have developed certain technologies to come back, and I'm going to go in detail to explain that we developed some technologies for personal care and also some technologies for campus spaces. We are monitoring the water sewage, we are monitoring the air, we are monitoring, we are using sanitation systems, we are using UV as installation for public spaces, temperature monitoring for masses, reorganization of the logistics of the places and so on. And we have an app that it will help us to really continue to see what's going to happen in all regard of the COVID TEC de Monterrey. So we have also created a dashboard, especially for the campus of TEC de Monterrey, where we can have information about government regulation at federal level, state level, and also information about what's going on in our campus. So we are monitoring what is happening all the time in our different campuses, so we can make decisions about how we can restart not only of course research, but also the activities of TEC de Monterrey in education because of the complexity of TEC de Monterrey. You can find out more information in this link, TEC de Monterrey, tech.mx/English research. So thank you, Peter, for the invitation, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Arturo. We'll of course move to the questions after our final panelist has made her remarks. And our final panelist is Sylvia He from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Sylvia is an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Resource Management, and she'll be discussing the dislocation from a different perspective, that of a researcher trying to restart and refocus her work by embracing new research opportunities that arise during the pandemic. Sylvia?
Thank you, Peter, for the nice introduction. And also I'd like to thank Ify, Mike, and Adriana for putting all this together. So my presentation will more focus on my personal perspective. So I'll start sharing my screen. So I'm associate professor from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and I'm also an academic lead of a WUN-funded project titled Low Carbon Transport, Individual Wellbeing, and Planetary Health. And in this project, I involve 3 other WUN universities and 9 other universities in the world, and then to undertake research, understanding the relationship between transport, well-being, and planetary health. And this year is a very special year for many of us because of the pandemic. But for myself, it's also very special because it happened to be my sabbatical leave. And in January to end of August, I'm actually on sabbatical leave, and along the many to-do items, I actually only managed to get 2 visits done, which is a visit to Tokyo and Portland State University. And in April, when I came back to Hong Kong, I had to undertake a 14-day mandatory quarantine in a hotel. So that is the view from my tiny hotel room. And I kind of feel that after the quarantine, probably many of you who experienced the quarantine feel you should be stronger and tougher after that. And after I came back to Hong Kong, I thought the situation already stabilizes. And as this article published by New York Times in early April, it tried to explain whether why the coronavirus cases in Hong Kong have already peaked. And indeed, when we look back, April is not the time when we can ensure it reached the peak. Right now, we actually entered the third wave of the pandemic. And the number of cases since August already surpassed the previous half year from January to June. So what we can learn from this experience is that our research time window is actually quite unpredictable, especially if you need to go out to the fieldwork and collect first-hand data. And that's why we need to be alert when the situation improves, whether we should go out to the field and collect our data. And for those who need to have access to government data, it also need to have plan, because when the situation of the pandemic worsened, government offices actually, they are closed or reduce the office hours. So it makes it quite difficult to access data. So during this period, we need to be quite mindful about the very variable research time window. And sometimes our projects deadlines are coming up. Because of the pandemic, don't feel hesitant to ask for extension, because the grantor will understand why we need the extension during this period. And the pandemic actually have caused a lot of impact on transport and mobility, which is my field of expertise. And so I decided to do an online survey about people's travel behavior and modal choice changes during the pandemic. And it turned out that in Hong Kong, because of personal and health and environmental reasons, people choose to use a personalized transport modes, such as walking, cycling, and even e-scooter, and including private vehicle as well. So to address this issue, actually, these preliminary findings would have some policy implication, such that whether the government should provide more infrastructure to support this new change in the travel behavior. And people's online shopping and online visiting friends and online education time has increased significantly during this period. So that also gives us some hint how we and people respond to the pandemic. So as academic, maybe we can also seize this opportunity to do some research about it, because it's a very nice natural experiment. And to share results, we can also organize workshops, online workshops. And indeed, for the project I'm leading, supported by WUN, I'm organizing an online workshop aiming the end of October or early November. So hopefully to have more information to share with you. And so when we are social scientists, sometimes we need to really collect first-hand data. And as I mentioned, that the survey I did in June is based on online. And phone survey would be another alternative. As some of the colleagues will also use social media, such as Instagram, to recruit respondents first, and then follow up by phone calls and email to conduct further interviews. And focus group nowadays can also be done via Zoom. And some colleagues share with me that it is kind of a surprising good experience, because they can gather a lot of people at the same time. And if you do a good ice-breaking session at the beginning, it could warm up the atmosphere easily and ask questions quite naturally during this session. And about during the focus group via the Zoom session, I actually learned it from my network. That is the Regional Studies Association Women's Network. And because during the pandemic, a lot of faculty members have different levels of stress and concerns. And women is one of these groups. So sometimes we need to maintain a very healthy mental status in order to get our work done. It would be nice for us to find a relevant network for us to share our concern and exchange ideas. So I joined this network last year because we share a common goal, which is to promote gender equality and diversity in academia. And this is quite well aligned with Chinese youth long-term efforts. And on our university's leading team, there are 2 female faculty members on that team, so which is very high compared to many other universities in Hong Kong and also in other places in the world. So during this group chat, we realized that women's time for research had been quite a concern during the pandemic. Some of the speakers mentioned they may have more time for childcare and house chore, etc. So it also affected journal submission compared to male faculty members. So I also did some survey in the June's online research. It turned out that in Hong Kong, among the 1,200 respondents, and turned out the gender discrepancy is not so large in Hong Kong. I think it's reflecting the gender equality situation in Hong Kong actually is not that bad. However, we do see the productivity level among female is lower compared to male in general. So the lesson we learned from here is maybe we need to join some supporting group to share your feeling, your concern, and get some support from each other. And then the last one is during the pandemic, we lost a lot of time and opportunity to visit places physically. However, there are some new opportunities coming up, such as given research seminars. So for myself, I deliver research seminars in India virtually. And also last week, I delivered a plenary speech in Salt Lake City, also virtually. And just a few hours ago today, I actually delivered a guest lecture in the National University of Singapore. So all these opportunities would not be available if not for the new adaptation and also the utilization of online platform. So I summarized my presentation with this slide, and I think I will hand over the stage to Ify with the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. So we'll now move to the Q&A session, which will be moderated by Aoife.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all of our speakers. The first question is directed to Walter, and it's about your Wi-Fi usage to identify hotspots. So the question is that I'm interested to know whether the use of monitoring Wi-Fi to identify hotspots has proved useful and what sort of interventions have resulted. Is this reported anywhere that we could access? The second question is directed to the panel generally and is, how has recruitment for research participants been impacted by the pandemic? And have you succeeded in overcoming those challenges? Thank you.
All right, I can respond to the first question. Yes, we have found it very useful. I expect over the coming month, now that we're back sort of having a sort of a hybrid situation of largely online, but some face-to-face classes, is finding out, you know, where the traffic bottlenecks are on campus and where are the areas that we need to have increased signage and perhaps more sanitation stations, et cetera, because of a lot of people in the same locale. So it has been very useful and has been sort of beta tested. We've done it mainly for employees and technicians who are on campus, but now we're seeing the students coming back in some numbers. So we haven't reported it out yet, but we have found it to be a useful tool. And if the person asking the question wants to contact me at walter.dixon@ualberta.ca, I can try to find some data that supports what I've just said. Thanks.
Thank you, Walter. Would anyone on the panel like to take on the second question about recruiting research participants?
Unmute myself. Yes, I was just saying that human participant research is the domain of our human participant research in the research ethics office, and I guess our biggest concern in that area is if we are inviting members of the public, for example, onto campus, that we need to make them aware of, you know, the increased risk of coming on into large spaces where there's lots of people on campus. And so as long as they're aware of that and they have given informed consent to participate, that's one thing. The other issue is most of our buildings are locked and require key access or proximity card access to enter the building. So if you're inviting people to participate in research, you need to meet them at the door, escort them to the place where they're going to be interviewed, etc. So there's some enhanced steps that need to be taken if you're going to get into that. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Walter. The next question is to Sarah. Have there been any particular challenges for the hibernation and then the restarting of research when research involved living materials? And then a general question to the panel to follow is, has the pandemic reinforced inequities in the global research landscape? And how has this impacted universities in particular?
Okay, so I'll make a stab at perhaps at the second one as well, but perhaps just a quick reflection on the previous questions. We are also going to be trialling a similar Wi-Fi monitoring of campus, but our students, our undergraduate students, are not back yet. So we will see how it goes, but we're planning on a locating hotspots and hoping to diffuse them. As for human participants, as I think Felix described, much of that work has gone on online, and I think more successfully. Our psychologists and health scientists, researchers report that transition went much more smoothly than they had thought, but it isn't all possible that way. And what I do know is that we're now starting to get demand from the participants themselves, that can we restart this kind of research, and this is what we're aiming to tackle in the next few weeks. So the question about research which involved living things, well, I think rather like what Walter described, we tried not to stop that. And so any research, it's plant-based and also animal-based, that was in train, we kept that ticking over as best we could. So, I mean, there are in some cases where some of those experiments which were partway through have had to be restarted because, you know, not everything was able to be maintained. But in the main, we tried to keep that going. I think one aspect that has been a little bit problematic is some of the environmental research where the ability to go out and take samples when we were in a very severe lockdown and we weren't allowed to travel at all, pretty much, then, you know, growing seasons have ended in some cases, and it's not possible just to say restart. We tried to restart that field work as quickly as we could, but some of that work will simply either have a year where the data isn't there, or will, you know, can only resume next time. In terms of inequities, yes, I think I've heard quite a few discussions about this topic, and I think at the moment we're whilst trying to address as much of this as possible locally in our decision making that we make in our departments and at the university, also collecting data at a slightly higher level to monitor what has happened. In terms of different groups of researchers perhaps being affected, but also if we find that happening, trying to put in support mechanisms to help people restart their research and to perhaps recover a little bit of that time that they've left. So there's things that we can do locally, but there's things that also we need to do perhaps in conjunction with the research councils, where they can see with slightly better statistics what has happened. But I am sure there is definitely something there to be studied.
Thank you, Sarah. I just want to note, I'm aware of the time and that we've reached the hour, but we're just going to continue for another 10 minutes or so to enable some more questions if everyone's still able to stay with us. Would anyone else like to comment on the point about equities, or shall we move on to the next question?
Eva, I just want to add some point about recruiting the respondents in our research. So from my own experience, I'm a social scientist, and so one of my projects also involved getting respondents through questionnaire survey on face-to-face on the street. So, so my research team have been monitoring the trend of the cases in Hong Kong. And so we waited until June when the situation stabilized. And so we went out to the street, and to incentivize respondents to do the survey with us. Of course, we keep in mind that the safety and health issue. And for the incentives, so we actually give, instead of a coupon that we usually give out, we give the respondents like masks and hand sanitizer as incentive. So I think it worked quite well in our case. And about another question about inequity, I think you can see that in the survey, a lot of respondents, they substitute their physical activities, going out of home, and with online activities. So it kind of reminds me that some sector of the people in the society, they may not be so well educated or have access to laptop computers or even Wi-Fi. I think those group of people may not be so fortunate to be able to do things at home. So I think that will create some equity issue. So that is my take on this.
Thank you, Sylvia. The next question is directed at Felix and is, has conducting research in the context of COVID introduced new ethical challenges when you were mentioning your ethical framework management? And then a general question to the panel is, have research methods fundamentally shifted to be conducted remotely, even beyond the pandemic? And what are the expectations about the impact of this on applying for research funding? Felix, are you happy to start?
Thank you. In terms of the ethics, yes, it's impacted on how we do our ethics, because now the emphasis now is making sure that by going to the field, you don't get COVID or your respondents. Okay, so in addition to making sure that what you plan to do is ethically right, the contact with a human being is so key. So for instance, now for the humanities one, we expect that every 2 weeks you report to us on what is happening in the field, so that we can take a decision on whether you should continue or hold on. We put in those clauses, having in mind that cases of COVID can rise or can increase or can fall. Okay, so we use that to monitor the researcher in the field and also vis-a-vis what is happening nationally. But like I said earlier, now all the ethical approval is done online. Committee members meet virtually. Submission is done virtually, and then we go through. In addition, we know that when you meet physically, we are very, very critical, okay? But we try to ensure that even with a virtual where committee members don't meet to share ideas, we try to make sure that they are also as critical as possible. Because here it's not only whether the research is sound, but also the human subjects that we are going to contact is also key. So that is how we are operating now. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. And would somebody like to address the question about changing research methods?
Yes.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Well, we have changed a lot of our research that requires surveying people using telephone calls and also online applications. So we have some projects that requires to really interview people. So we are trying to use now the means that are available to do that. We are using a lot of telephone, calls to do the interviews. And also we are trying, because of these limitations also of how many people has access to internet in Mexico, we are doing that by telephone calls and cellular, and in some cases we put surveys on internet. And regarding the second question about funding, the Mexican government has launched specific calls for tackling COVID issues at the federal government. So they open specific calls in short periods of time at the federal government, and also because there are also state funding agencies, also they open some calls. So we have been able to prepare proposals to tackle problems of COVID using that federal funding and state funding. At least that's what's happening in Mexico. Thank
you, Arthur. I believe Walter, yeah.
Yeah, I can contribute from the Canadian side. Generally speaking, our funding agencies and councils have been very accommodating in terms of, offering no-cost extensions, or in some cases, fully funded extensions to projects. There also was the release of a very large program by the federal government called the Canada Research Continuity Emergency Fund, which it had sort of three phases to it. The first of which was basically allowing for universities and their researchers to claim for personnel expenses for both graduate students, technicians, et cetera, who were basically forced to be at home and couldn't continue with their research programs. So there's that. The money that we received for that was proportional to our kind of historical success with those councils. So in the case of the University of Alberta, we got something of the order of 11.6 million to fund this particular program. It covers personnel costs, as I said. If you were struggling to achieve particular outcomes for research because, for example, the disruption of a field season, as was mentioned, and also incremental costs of research. I mean, trying to do research in labs that are only 30% occupancy, for example, or special requirements for PPE or sanitation. Those kind of incremental costs that were incurred could be claimed through this program as well. So I think generally speaking, we're quite pleased with the response from the funding agencies in terms of helping.
Thank you, Walter. Given that we're almost 10 minutes over, I'd like to hand over back to Peter for the final remarks.
I'd like to thank our panelists for really interesting insights that show clearly the benefits of looking across a diverse collection of universities and comparing and contrasting the approaches they've taken to the COVID challenges. I'd also like to thank all those who joined us, in many cases at unsocial hours, and who raised interesting and challenging questions in the discussion. We hope you found the webinar useful. We're interested in feedback, and we'd welcome your comments so that we can ensure that we make future webinars as valuable as possible. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and please join us in future discussions of this kind. Thanks again, and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.